I had been doing Rover pet sits part-time for about a year and a half. I was finishing my degree at Wayne State. I arrived at a 5-day sit in Canton, Michigan on a Wednesday afternoon. Within 40 minutes of unpacking my overnight bag, I had found a locked door upstairs. The listing had said it would be unlocked. The Rover profile had read like every other Rover profile. A woman named Daria, 3 previous 5-star bookings, a friendly photo of her with a golden retriever named Maple. The booking instructions had said, all rooms accessible, feel free to use the upstairs office Wi-Fi for your studies. The upstairs office door was locked. I'm Ariana, 23, finishing my elementary education degree at Wayne State University in Detroit. I had been doing Rover sits since my junior year, part of my rent, most of my food budget. I had completed 46 sits across the Detroit metro by that Wednesday, average rating 4.9. Daria's house was a brick 2-story in a quiet Canton subdivision. I had stopped at the Dunkin' off Woodward on my way out of Detroit and was sipping a cold brew when I pulled into the driveway. She had given me detailed instructions. Feed Maple twice a day. Water plants every other day. Bring in the mail and stack it on the kitchen counter. Sleep in the guest bedroom upstairs. Use the office Wi-Fi if I needed to do work on my laptop. The booking was $175 for the 5 days plus tip. Honestly, that was decent money for 5 days of sit work plus a quiet house to study in. I had checked the upstairs office door first. The Wi-Fi router lived in there, per Daria's notes, and I wanted to confirm I could connect for my classwork. The door was locked. I tried the handle 3 times. The thing is, it was a standard interior bedroom door with a button lock, the kind you can pop with a thin paperclip if you really needed to. I did not pop it. I mean, that would have been an enormous violation of trust. I texted Daria through the Rover app. I asked, politely, whether she had meant to leave the office open and whether she could let me know how to access the Wi-Fi from elsewhere. She did not respond. The app showed her as last active 16 hours earlier, which would have been before her flight. I went back downstairs. I fed Maple. I watered the plants. I sat in the kitchen with my laptop, using my phone's hotspot for internet. I did some studying. I read for a few hours. At about 7:30 in the evening, I went upstairs to put my overnight bag in the guest bedroom. As I passed the locked office door, I noticed something I had not seen during my earlier check. The door's threshold, the gap between the bottom of the door and the floor, showed a tiny stack of envelopes that had slid out from under the door. The envelopes were tucked just under the door's edge, partially visible from the hallway. I picked one up. I have replayed the next few minutes more times than I can count because the police walked me through it twice. I picked up one envelope. I looked at the addressee name. The name was not Daria. The name was a different woman, with a different last name, at the same Canton address. I looked at the postmark. The postmark was from 3 weeks earlier. I picked up a second envelope. Different addressee name again, different last name, same address, different postmark, 6 weeks earlier. There were maybe 12 envelopes in the small stack visible at the threshold. 5 different addressee names, all addressed to the same Canton address. I went downstairs. I sat in the kitchen. I did not pop the lock on the upstairs office door. I called Rover's safety line from my phone. Rover has a 24/7 safety hotline for active sits. I described what I had found. The Rover agent asked me to take photographs of the envelopes I had picked up and to immediately leave the property. The agent said they would dispatch local authorities to do a wellness check on the property and would contact Daria through her registered emergency contacts. I packed my overnight bag. I left Maple with food and water topped off. I locked the front door behind me using the key Daria had left in the lockbox. I texted Daria one final time, saying I had been called away due to a family emergency, and that Rover would be in touch with her. A script the Rover agent had asked me to use, to avoid alerting the listing host that I had reported suspicious activity. I drove to a Starbucks 2 miles away. I stayed there until the police came to take my statement at the Starbucks parking lot at midnight. Canton PD's investigation revealed that the woman whose name was on the Rover account, Daria, had been a real person who had legitimately been the homeowner. The Daria account, however, had been hijacked 4 months earlier by a different woman who had since been operating it as a fraudulent listing platform. The fraudulent operator had been using the legitimate Daria's house to receive mail under multiple false identities, running a small-scale identity theft scheme. Intercepting and reselling personal information from mail, she had been redirecting to the address. The fraudulent operator had not been on the property when I arrived. She had been using rover sitters like me as unwitting house-sitting cover while she ran her mail intercept operation. 5 different prior rover sitters had been at the Canton house in the prior 4 months. None of them had registered the locked door anomaly because the locked door was not in the booking instructions to begin with. The prior listings had not mentioned the upstairs office Wi-Fi at all. My listing had included the Wi-Fi instruction. The fraudulent operator had recently updated the profile and had not updated the room access notes to match. The fraudulent operator was identified through the postmarks on the envelopes, plus a USPS investigation. She was arrested 2 weeks later in Ohio. She was charged with felony identity theft, felony mail redirect fraud, breach of fiduciary trust under Michigan's gig worker fraud statute, and operating a fraudulent online listing platform. She pleaded to 4-year state prison, plus 3 years supervised release, plus a lifetime ban from any gig economy platform, plus restitution of $42,000 to the various identity theft victims whose mail she had been redirecting. The legitimate homeowner Daria, the real Daria, was identified by the investigation and notified. Her account had been hijacked through a credential stuffing attack 4 months earlier. She had not been receiving rover booking notifications because the email on the account had also been hijacked. The real Daria had been in Florida for the past 3 months living with her sister after a divorce. Her actual dog, Maple, was a different dog entirely. The dog in the fraudulent profile photo had been a stock image. The dog I had been pet sitting was a foster dog. The fraudulent operator had taken it from a Detroit shelter and had been using it as part of the cover. I switched off Rover within the week. I picked up daytime tutoring shifts at the campus learning center to replace the income. I finished my degree the following May. What I keep landing on is the threshold. The stack of envelopes had been just visible from the hallway. The door's threshold gap had been about 1/4 inch, wider than a standard interior door. If the gap had been narrower, the envelopes would have stayed inside the room. The fraudulent operator had been stockpiling intercepted mail in the office across multiple weeks, waiting to process and resell. The volume of mail had eventually exceeded the room's flat storage capacity. It had begun spilling under the door. I had noticed it because I had been passing the door at the right angle, in the right light. If I had gone straight from the kitchen to the guest bedroom without that pass, I might not have noticed for hours. The hours would have been the difference. Between Canton PD intercepting the operator's next mail pickup and the operator clearing out the room before the wellness check, the Canton PD sergeant who sat with me through the case told me something specific. The fraudulent operator had been on a Rover platform shortlist of accounts flagged for anomalous booking pattern. Rover's internal trust and safety team had been tracking the Daria hijacked account for approximately 7 weeks. Because of an unusual pattern, accepting short-notice bookings from sitters with low completed sit histories. The team had not yet escalated to the platform's enforcement layer because the bookings themselves had not produced any negative reviews from sitters. The detective said the sitters who had not flagged anomalies had likely just not noticed the threshold gap mail stockpile detail. The detail I had. He also told me something else. One of the 5 identity theft victim names on the redirected mail had already been on the platform's trust and safety team's separate investigation list as a potential consumer fraud reporter. The threads had not been connected internally because Rover's trust and safety team had been understaffed during the prior summer. The Canton PD case forced the connection. My husband and I had been planning a week-long trip to Hawaii for almost a year. We finally flew out on a Saturday morning. 7 days later, we came home to our Boulder house at 11 p.m. Within the first 30 minutes, I noticed something. The drawer in my jewelry box was not pushed all the way in. The drawer where I keep my mother's engagement ring. We had hired a Rover pet sitter named Azure to stay with our cat Pepper for the 7 days. Azure had 480 positive reviews on her Rover profile and a 5-star average across 2 years of sits. By 2 I had pulled the previous 7 days of Ring camera footage. What I saw in the kitchen camera view from day 3 changed my understanding of what the previous 20 months had been. I was 47, a software architect at a Boulder tech company. My husband Mark is 49, also in tech. We had been in our Boulder house for 9 years. Mark drinks his cold brew out of a mason jar every morning. It's a whole Boulder thing, you get used to it. We had 2 interior Ring cameras, one in the kitchen and one in the entryway, that we kept on while we traveled. The cameras stored to a Ring Cloud account that I could review remotely. I had checked the cameras the first 2 days of our trip. The footage had shown Azure arriving on time, feeding Pepper, watering plants. Normal. To be fair, I had stopped checking after day 2 because the footage had been routine. The jewelry box drawer was at my dresser in the master bedroom. I had not pulled it out before I had left. The drawer typically sits flush. When I saw it ajar by maybe a ½ inch, I assumed Mark had pushed it in and not closed it fully. Except Mark would not have gone into my jewelry box at all. His birthday present for me had been planned for our return from Hawaii. It would not have required him to look in there. I opened the drawer. Honestly, my heart was racing. My mother's engagement ring was there. Both of our wedding bands were there. The pearl earrings my grandmother had left me were there. 3 small diamond studs were there. The drawer had been pulled out and pushed back in, but nothing was visibly missing. I mean, nothing visibly missing. I'm going to lay out the next 4 hours the way I laid them out for the police because they walked me through them 3 times. I went to my home office. I pulled the Ring app on my laptop. I started scrolling through the kitchen camera footage from the start of the trip. Day 1. Azure arrives at 4 p.m. with her overnight bag. She greets Pepper, she unpacks, she goes upstairs out of camera view. She returns to the kitchen at 6. She makes herself dinner. She watches television. She goes back upstairs at 10. Normal. Day 2. She wakes at 7, feeds Pepper, leaves the house at 9, returns at 3 p.m. with a takeout coffee. She does laundry. She watches television. She goes upstairs at 9 p.m. Normal. Day 3. She wakes at 6:50. She feeds Pepper. At 7:25, she goes upstairs. The kitchen camera does not show her again until 11 a.m., almost 4 hours unaccounted for. I pulled the entryway camera. The entryway camera does not show her come back downstairs during those 4 hours. She had been upstairs the entire time. I pulled the Ring footage from the front porch camera. The front porch camera showed nothing unusual. No one came in or out the front door during those 4 hours. The back door I had not put a camera on. Pepper's litter box was in the laundry room near the back door. I went back through the kitchen camera at 11 a.m. day 3. Azure came down the stairs at 11:07. She was carrying a small notebook in her right hand. She was holding her phone in her left hand. She set the notebook on the kitchen counter. She opened her phone. She scrolled. She looked at the notebook. She wrote something in the notebook. She put the notebook in her overnight bag. She made herself toast. I scrolled to day 4. Day 4, she did the same routine. Wake, feed cat, leave kitchen at 7:30, come back at 11 with the notebook. She did this every day for the remaining 5 days of the trip. I went upstairs. I went into the master bedroom. I went into our shared closet. I went into the small jewelry safe I keep at the back of the closet, behind a row of suitcases. The safe was locked, but the keypad showed 7 failed entry attempts in the past 3 days. The safe was a standard Sentry-style 4-digit keypad. I had set the code to my mother's birthday. Azure had been trying to guess the code. I called Boulder PD at 3:20 a.m. The detective who arrived at 4 a.m. took our statement and the Ring footage. He took the laptop. He took photographs of the jewelry box drawer that was ajar. He took photographs of the safe and the failed entry log. The investigation that followed lasted 2 months. Azure was identified. Real name, Azure Foster, 38. She had 3 prior misdemeanor theft convictions in 2 other states. She had not disclosed them on her Rover profile background check because Rover's background check at the time did not cross-reference between states. The Boulder PD detective laid out for me what they had pieced together by month 2. Azure had been operating a systematic Rover account-based theft pattern for approximately 20 months across 43 Rover sits at homes in Boulder, Denver, and surrounding metro areas. She had been keeping a notebook with detailed inventories of each home she had sat at. What jewelry was kept in what room, what cash was kept where, what safes were where, what valuables were displayed, and what were hidden. The notebook had 387 entries across her 20 months of operation. She had not been stealing from every house. Instead, she had been mapping the houses for resale of the inventory data to a network of fences. The fences would target the houses subsequently, after Azure had moved on to other sits. When Boulder PD raided Azure's storage unit in Denver, they recovered her notebook, plus catalogs of approximately $700,000 worth of jewelry that had been stolen from her prior client homes. Not by Azure directly, but by the fences using her inventory data. Approximately $500,000 of that recovered jewelry was traced to specific prior clients. My mother's engagement ring was not in the recovered cash. Azure had failed to access our safe, but Azure's notebook contained a detailed inventory of our master bedroom. The jewelry box drawer contents, the safe location, my pearl earrings, plus an estimate of approximate dollar value she had assigned to each item. Our notebook entry indicated she had planned to return for the safe contents, with a professional locksmith fence within 90 days of our sit. Azure was charged with 43 counts of felony breach of fiduciary trust, conspiracy to commit grand larceny across state lines, identity theft, and operating a criminal enterprise. She was convicted at trial 9 months later. 8 years state prison, plus 6 years supervised release, plus restitution of approximately $500,000 to identified victims. Rover banned her permanently. Rover's platform also issued an updated background check policy following her conviction that includes cross-state misdemeanor cross-referencing. Mark and I have not used Rover or any pet-sitting platform since. We hired a friend's college-age daughter to stay with Pepper during our trips now. We pay her directly. No platform. We had 4 months of therapy. What I haven't stopped weighing is the kitchen camera footage from day 3. I had stopped checking the cameras on day 3. If I had checked them, I would have seen that Azure was off camera for 4 hours in the middle of the day. I would not have known what she was doing during those 4 hours. I would not have framed it as suspicious. I might have framed it as her sleeping in. I do not know whether checking the cameras would have changed anything. I do know that the cameras were the reason Azure was caught at all. The cameras had captured the proof that Mark and I had been 20 months too late to feel safe in our own bedroom.
I had been a professional house sitter in the Los Angeles area for almost 2 years. A network of high net worth social media influencers, Sherman Oaks, Bel Air, Malibu. I arrived at a Sherman Oaks mansion on a Tuesday evening for a 10-day sit. On the third night at 9:45 p.m., the doorbell rang. The Ring intercom showed a man in a brown delivery uniform holding a clipboard. He said he had a package from the homeowner that needed signature confirmation. The homeowner had not mentioned any expected delivery. I checked the Ring footage of the front gate cameras for the past 48 hours. The same man had been at the property's gate 3 times over the prior 2 days, each time leaving without ringing. By the time I had finished checking the cameras, 2 more men had appeared at the front door behind him. The doorbell man was holding the clipboard up to the Ring camera as a visual cover. I'll call myself Calvin, 28, a professional house sitter and former hospitality manager. I had left the hotel industry 2 years earlier. An influencer client had offered me a regular sitting gig at a rate higher than my hotel salary. The work had grown into a referral network. By that Tuesday, I had sat for approximately 40 different influencer homes across LA, ranging from Sherman Oaks to Bel Air to Malibu. Honestly, I had grabbed an in-and-out double-double off the 101 before driving up the hill. Third night of a 10-day sit, I figured I deserved it. The Sherman Oaks mansion I was sitting at that week belonged to a fitness influencer named Mariah Quinn, who had 3.8 million Instagram followers. Mariah and her husband were in Italy. The mansion was a 6-bedroom estate behind a security gate with a coded entry. Mariah had given me the coded entry the alarm code, the keys to 2 safes, none of which contained valuables in her absence. She had emptied them before leaving. Plus, the contact information for her security service. The doorbell at 9:45 was unusual. Mariah had explicitly told me not to accept any deliveries during my sit, because all her shipments would go to a separate mail receive address. Anything coming to the house would not be legitimate. I checked the Ring app on my phone. The man at the door had a brown uniform, the clipboard, a small package wrapped in standard brown paper. He looked like a delivery courier. I scrolled back through the front gate cameras in the Ring app. The same man had been at the property's gate at 4 p.m. Monday. He had pulled up in a brown panel van, parked for 2 minutes, and driven off without ringing. He had been there again at 8 a.m. Tuesday. Same van, same 2-minute pause. He had been there at 2 p.m. Tuesday. Same pattern. By the time I had finished checking the Tuesday 2 p.m. clip on the gate camera, the Ring intercom showed that 2 more men had appeared at the front door behind the doorbell man. They had come around the side of the property, where the perimeter wall has a low spot near the garden bed. They had scaled the wall. The Ring intercom showed all 3 of them at the front door now, with the doorbell man holding the clipboard up high to cover the camera angle. I'll set out the next sequence the way LAPD asked me to, because they walked me through it 3 times. I did not answer the door. I walked very quietly through the house to the master bedroom suite, which is the room Mariah had told me had the most monitored panic button setup. The master bedroom had a small wireless panic button on a wristband. Mariah had used it once during a press tour, when paparazzi had tried to enter through the back garden. I put the wristband on my left wrist. I pressed the panic button. The Mariah Quinn Home Security Service had a hardwired line to LAPD's Sherman Oaks Division. The panic button activation triggered 3 things simultaneously. The home's full alarm system began a silent count-up. The security service's tablet system pinged LAPD, and the front gate's emergency close mechanism began to engage. The gate could not close because the 3 men had already entered through the perimeter wall. The men did not know the gate was trying to close. I went to the master bedroom closet, which is a walk-in with an interior latch deadbolt. I went inside. I closed the door, I latched the deadbolt, I sat on the floor in the dark. Through the closet door, I could hear glass breaking at the front of the house. The 3 men had broken a side panel window next to the front door and were entering through it. I heard footsteps in the hallway. I heard voices speaking quietly. They were not speaking quietly anymore by the time they reached the master bedroom. They were calling out, "Hello? Anybody home? Hello?" I did not respond. I did not move. The closet's interior latch was the only thing between them and me. LAPD Sherman Oaks Division dispatched 2 cruisers and a SWAT-trained tactical team within 6 minutes of the panic button ping. The security services dispatch had coordinated with LAPD via the hardwired line. The team approached the property from 2 directions, 1 cruiser at the front gate, the tactical team at the broken window entry point. The 3 men inside the house heard the cruisers arrive. They started moving toward the back of the house. The Ring cameras captured the entire encounter, exterior, interior, and the panic button-triggered alarm log. The men attempted to exit through the back garden. The tactical team had already deployed 2 officers at the back garden gate. The 3 men surrendered without further resistance. I did not come out of the closet until an LAPD officer announced himself through the closet door. He verified his identity by quoting Mariah Quinn's authorized code word. Mariah had pre-shared it with the security service for exactly this kind of scenario. The investigation revealed a coordinated home invasion pattern, targeting LA influencer homes, when the homeowner was publicly known to be traveling. The 3 men had been monitoring Mariah Quinn's Instagram stories from Italy. They cross-referenced her travel with public property records. They identified the Sherman Oaks address and cased the property for 48 hours via the brown van pattern I had seen on the gate cameras. Across the prior 6 months, the same 3 men had been linked to 4 similar incidents at influencer homes in LA, Beverly Hills, and Encino. 2 of the 4 had resulted in the sitter being physically harmed. 1 zip-tied for 6 hours, 1 struck with a pistol butt. None of the 4 had been at panic button-equipped homes. Mariah Quinn's installation was the variable that closed my case. The three men, Andre Marcus, 31, Damon Walker, 28, Tyrone Page, 33, were each charged with felony aggravated robbery and conspiracy, plus attempted kidnapping based on the prior pattern, trespass, possession of burglary tools, and use of deadly weapons. The DA stacked the charges. All three convicted 12 months later. Marcus got 14 years plus 5 supervised. Walker got 12. Page got 10. Mariah's homeowner's policy paid out approximately $325,000. The broken window, trauma compensation, therapy costs, and a year of lost wages while I took time off. LAPD subsequently used my panic button footage in 6 related cases the following year. Each one resulted in a panic button intercept within similar response windows. I had wrist abrasions from where the zip ties would have been used had the three men reached me before LAPD arrived. They had recovered 3 zip tie bundles from the front door entry, ready for use. They had not been deployed because I had been in the closet. I had 8 months of weekly therapy. I returned to the sitting network 6 months after the trial, but only at properties with full panic button infrastructure. Approximately a third of my prior clients did not have panic button setups. I dropped them from my client roster. Mariah Quinn and 3 other influencer clients funded the panic button installations for the remaining clients I retained. The panic button installations have prevented one further incident at a different client's Bel Air property in the year since. I do not sit for clients without panic button infrastructure. I do not sit at properties where the homeowner has posted travel content publicly within 48 hours of my arrival. I have an internal rule. I do not communicate publicly during a sit. No Instagram stories, no Twitter, no TikTok. Because publicly broadcasting my presence at a property is functionally an advertisement. An advertisement to anyone monitoring the homeowner's social media that the property is being occupied by someone other than the owner. What I keep tracing back to is the wristband. Mariah had handed it to me during the orientation walkthrough on the first day. She had explained the press tour incident. I had not thought I would ever need it. I had put it in my overnight bag rather than wearing it daily. On the third night, the wristband was in my bag at the foot of the bed in the guest room, about 30 feet from the master bedroom suite. 12 seconds to cover. 12 seconds was the only window I had before the men entered the house. The chain of decisions that ended with my survival had started with an influencer's husband installing a panic button wristband, 3 years before I had ever heard of Mariah Quinn. I sent Mariah a thank you card after the trial. She sent one back. She thanked me for not taking the wristband for granted. She told me her husband had installed it over her objection. She had thought it was paranoid security theater at the time. She had reconsidered. She offered to pay for any additional security I wanted for my own apartment. I declined. I have a deadbolt and a second-floor unit. The wristband from her property is in a drawer at my parents' house in Modesto. I have not looked at it since the trial. I know it is there. That is sufficient. The wristband is not a totem. It is a tool.